With 2022 finally coming to a close, and as I reflect upon the year in gaming, it's been interesting to say the least, with some massive hit AAA games, a few questionable remakes, and quite a few big announcements of upcoming games. So, in light of the passing of another year, I figured I would do a video covering my favourite games that I played during the year, allowing me a chance to talk about some titles that I didn't have time to devote entire videos to. Also, not all of the games on my list are titles from 2022, as I'm always in a perpetual state of catch-up given the sheer volume of games being released these days, and it's impossible for me to keep up, a struggle I'm sure everyone can relate to.
Small world, eh?
Before I get into my top 10, I do have a couple of honourable mentions, games that I had a good time with but don't have that much to say about. The first one being Bethesda's Fallout 76, a game that had a fairly rocky launch back at the end of 2018, but has since received a lot of updates and new content added. I admittedly didn't play it back at launch, but I was aware that a lot of the negativity surrounding the game was pretty hyperbolic and stemmed a lot from some unrealistic expectations, as really Fallout 76 is basically a giant expansion pack to Fallout 4, now with online play, which is exactly the mindset I went in with when I picked this up for $30 earlier this year. The creation engine may be showing its age a bit now, but Fallout 76's world is still pleasing on the eyes to explore, and being able to build campsites anywhere is a fun new addition. Fallout never changes.
Remember short, controlled bursts.
Aliens Fireteam Elite was another game I picked up this year, and it's a mostly solid and enjoyable Left 4 Dead clone. It lacks the same emergent gameplay and unpredictability of Left 4 Dead, as a lot of the alien encounters here are largely scripted as opposed to being reactive to the players. But it makes a good use of the Aliens license, and definitely isn't the worst Aliens game I've played. Just make sure you play it with some friends. This year I finally treated myself to a decent computer upgrade, as I got an MSI laptop with an AMD RTX 3050 graphics card. So naturally the first game I installed to test it out was Quake 2 RTX, and it's an incredibly stunning visual upgrade. Quake 2 has always been one of my favourite 90s shooters, and I like it just a bit more than Quake 1, purely because I played it first, so revisiting the game now with all these amazing visual overhauls was quite a trip. Seeing ray trace reflections across the water surfaces and computer monitors, the impressive new lighting model, as well as the ability to change the time of day affecting the atmosphere was fun to play around with. And what's even better is that Quake 2 RTX is completely free if you already own Quake 2, and only involves copying a few files over into the RTX install folder.
Everything's going to be just fine. My name's Leon. I'm under the President's order to rescue you.
What? My father?
That's right. And I have to get you out of here. Now come with me.
And my last honourable mention goes to the Resident Evil 4 HD Project mod that was finished back in February. I tried to play it on my old laptop, but due to how graphics intensive the mod was, I was unable to play it with a stable frame rate, and it felt like I was controlling Leon's Snail Kennedy. Now that I have a decent rig to play with, I have reinstalled the whopping 38GB mod and replayed Resident Evil 4 for probably like the 1000th time, and this was probably my slowest playthrough of the game ever, as I was always stopping to look at all the new artwork.
Hey, what are you looking at?
It's rather incredible that a couple of fans spent about 10 years working on this project to recreate all of the game's art assets that are even better than the HD textures Capcom created for the HD re-releases of Resident Evil 4. The visual differences are subtle at a glance, but upon closer inspection you will see a far greater degree of detail and clarity in all the textures, and it is really impressive. I still haven't had a chance to try out the VR version of Resident Evil 4, but I would definitely like to before the remake comes out next March. The remake that I'm still quite apprehensive about, but I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic as the new footage did look somewhat decent. And so, with my honourable mentions out of the way, let's get into the top 10 games that I played in 2022, shall we? Remembering that this is just my list. If you disagree, that's fine, it's the internet.
Peter Quill, what does killing two birds with one stone signify?
You mean solving two problems with a single solution?
Ha! I knew it! There are no birds on nowhere.
Guardians of the Galaxy is a game that I had no intention of playing when it was released in 2021, due to the pretty middling reception that Avengers game received. But this year PlayStation launched its new Game Pass version of the PlayStation Plus with a bunch of free games to try, and Guardians was one such game. I do need to preface that this is one of the most generic third-person action games I've played, even with the various different attacks you can unlock for the other Guardians, and the huddle feature that empowers everyone to the tune of Rick Astley. I'm not kidding. This has all of the tropes of the Uncharted-style ghost train ride, long sections of running and climbing through gorgeous scenic environments, lots of talking, followed by arena-based combat sections. But what made this constantly enjoyable for me was the caliber of the writing on display throughout the game, particularly the banter between the Guardians and the absurd situations they find themselves in constantly. So I found Guardians of the Galaxy extremely hard to put down. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, like in any way really, which is why it's so low on the list, but it does everything that it sets out to do pretty competently, and if you're just after a feel-good game that will make you laugh almost constantly, there are definitely worse games out there that you could play. The Last Stand Legacy Collection was a surprise Steam listing that I somehow stumbled upon and was an immediate purchase. For those unaware of the historic context here, The Last Stand is an old 2D Flash game from the Newgrounds.com era, back while I was still in high school. It was a pretty simple wave-based zombie horde shooter that was remarkably addictive with some great sprite work. The game was pretty popular, particularly in my computer class where everyone didn't want to do work, and went on to spawn 2 sequels that are also included in this collection. The second game played largely the same as the first, but featured more environments, whereas the third game was a very different beast, moving into more of a Metroidvania-type adventure survival game, where you explore Union City, looting houses and fending off more emergent hordes of zombies. For the incredibly low asking price, this is a fun piece of internet gaming history preserved on Steam. There is also a fully fledged 3D sequel, but I haven't played that yet. Maybe next year. Boomer shooters have become increasingly popular over the last couple of years, especially in the indie scene, and Proteus is one of the finest examples of what makes this resurging subgenre so much fun. It takes the best elements of the original Doom and its wildly popular Brutal Doom mod, coats it in a Quake 2 style 3D paint, and creates a wildly fun shooter experience. I did a video on this one back in October, so if you want me to go more in depth on it, feel free to check that video out. Who remembers that old PS2 shooter, Black, by Criterion Games from 2005? It's one of my favourite PS2 games, and where I think my love for destruction simulations in video games began.
Breaking stuff's fun, right?
If a game has destructible environments in it, I will find myself thoroughly entertained for hours, like with the still impressive Geomod destruction utilised in Red Faction Guerrilla. I've also spent more time with the maypole of controversy Hatred than I'm comfortable with due to its destruction physics that are better showcased in this third-person mod. So when I heard that there was a voxel-based destruction simulator sandbox game, well, I was pretty quick to check it out.
Ah, back to smashing through things for fun and profit. Lovely!
Teardown has quickly become one of my unwinding games that I boot up every so often to chill out and watch a bunch of stuff break, especially with the amazing fan-made content that's available. My favourite mods are these giant dinosaurs that you can spawn and watch them chase after you, destroying everything in their path and getting stuck in the process is like making your own little kaiju film. It's like the best Godzilla game ever made, besides the 2014 masterpiece that was the Godzilla game on PS4.
I thought your mutations cleansed you of humanity, stripped you of emotions.
You don't need mutations to strip men of their humanity. I've seen plenty of examples.
So this may come as a bit of a surprise, but yes, I did not play The Witcher 3 until 2022. In fact, I actually played Cyberpunk first, which is another game where the negativity surrounding it is extremely hyperbolic, and coming from a loud majority that haven't even played it. The reason for my reticence in not playing The Witcher 3 was simply because I was aware of how deep the lore was in the universe, and I felt that I needed to play the first two games beforehand. And I made a good effort with The Witcher 1, sinking around 20 hours into it. However, after watching season 2 of the TV show that I now doubt will be renewed after the Liam Hemsworth-led season 4, I could no longer wait and I dived into The Witcher 3 and very quickly learned why it received so many Game of the Year awards in 2015. The combat itself in the game is a little bit floaty for my particular tastes, but the sheer depth of the writing and storytelling is absolutely astounding, and just goes to show that if you want to make an intricately crafted and believable world full of meaningful choices for the player, there really is no substitute outside of putting the fucking work in. Many quests are interconnected, like the search for a baron's missing wife and daughter leads you to meeting up with a witch from Geralt's past and discovering a trio of swamp witches fostering a group of lost children. Then you get to decide who you want to romantically pursue. The obvious answer was Triss, I mean, come on. And before you know it, you've sunk 80 hours into roaming the continent, you have about 15 different Witcher contracts, you've reunited an old woman with a pan, chased after a lost goat, and you're no closer to finding Cire than you were at the start of the game. Yeah, good game. I like the bits where you play as Cire.
They're weapons too now.
That's right. Cord cutters.
Another game that I finally checked off my never-ending backlog was Hideo Kojima's divisive 2019 title Death Stranding. Kojima has always been about trying out new gameplay ideas and systems throughout his career, exemplified when Metal Gear Solid 3 became mostly about eating frogs in the jungle. Death Stranding has been a hard sell for a lot of audiences out there, as on the surface it's just the Norman Reedus postal delivery game with some spooky ghosts. But for those who are able to get on board with Kojima's weird sensibilities, this is probably one of the more unique gaming experiences available out there. It's great for blobbing out with your favourite podcast as you wander through the gorgeous remnants of its version of post-apocalyptic America that very effectively captures the theme of isolation. I also found the unique multiplayer element fascinating, where pieces of equipment and structures created by other players can appear in your world, and vice versa for the structures you make. It can be such a relief coming across a timefall shelter that another player made just when you needed one, creating a unique online experience where every action is beneficial in some way. It's not quite perfect, as I think the combat is often at odds with the core gameplay loop, and the boss battles make you feel like you're playing a different game sometimes. One of the missions where I had to climb a giant snowy mountain felt more like an appropriate boss fight for this game than shooting Mads Mikkelsen was. Plus, once you unlock the ability to build ziplines, the traversal across the mountains becomes broken in how easy and fast it gets. But hey, you get to punch Troy Baker in the face, which is worth the price of admission. Looking forward to Death Stranding 2.
Wait, he's the other sample they collected at Nibelheim.
Why did you come here? I told you to go away.
He doesn't look well, Zach.
One of the biggest surprises of the year was the announcement that my favourite Final Fantasy game, Crisis Core on the PSP, was getting a remaster remake. I just did a full video going into detail about the changes and everything I loved about the remaster, with the exception of Zach's new voice actor, so if you want to know my extended thoughts, feel free to check that video out. But yeah, seeing one of my favourite games revitalised with such effort and love was one of my favourite experiences of the year. And yep, I'm currently replaying Final Fantasy VII Remake because of it. Yes, number 3 is the cute cat game that's actually not very cute in a lot of places that drove the internet crazy earlier in the year. Stray was an absolute joy to play through pretty much from start to finish. The Unreal Engine was utilised extremely effectively to create some gorgeously stylized environments, and the game's art style was consistently attractive. The animation work on the cat itself was also really impressive, and being able to meow on command was the icing on the cake. In my opinion, the game suffered a little from some simple game design and a lack of any real challenge, but these are incredibly minor issues in what is otherwise a fantastic little game. and if you somehow haven't played it yet, I strongly recommend it.
But you, I am afraid, are maidenless.
I used to have a bit of a love-hate relationship with From Software's Dark Souls games. When I was younger, I really tried to get into them as I found the art style very appealing, but I couldn't quite get good, as it were. Until Dark Souls 3 in 2016, where it all finally clicked for me and I fell in love with the series. So when Elden Ring launched at the beginning of the year, it was a real no-brainer that I would pick this title up. While on the surface, Elden Ring is essentially just Dark Souls the open world, this transition actually made a pretty big change in how the player was able to approach progression throughout the game, as the majority of the open world was available from the get-go, and now certain boss fights were no longer progression roadblocks in the same way they were in the previous Metroidvania-designed Dark Souls games. It was just so refreshing to play through an open world game that wasn't influenced by the Ubisoft model, where the map is cluttered with icons and outposts to take over, and the focus was purely on the joy of exploration throughout Elden Ring's breathtaking world, and then dying over and over and over and over again and fighting numerous dragons. Even though the Souls-like subgenre I think is becoming a little tired at this point, particularly in the indie scene, I still wholeheartedly believe that a Souls-like take on Castlevania will be a great way to reboot and revitalize that franchise, especially now that Konami is finally willing to outsource its IPs to other developers, as we've seen with the recent Silent Hill games announced. Either way, Elden Ring was a fantastic game, and I can easily understand why it won Game of the Year at the Game Awards.
Stop with the stupid chime! Oh dear. I'm sorry. I don't know where that came from.
But for me personally, and this was a surprise even to myself, the game that I enjoyed the most in 2022 was God of War Ragnarok. This was a surprise to me because I didn't exactly love the 2018 soft reboot of God of War. That's not to say that I didn't enjoy it, because it was a gorgeous looking game with mostly fun combat, and the acting from the cast elevated what I found to be a rather low stakes and languid story that ultimately felt like one big setup. There was definitely some great moments, but I never felt an overwhelmingly strong urge to replay the game when I finished it, unlike the previous God of War games.
Why are you here?
However, Ragnarok takes everything that was good about the 2018 game and literally just hits the ground running with a far more engaging story with actual stakes and much more complex exploration of the father-son relationship between Kratos and Atreus, along with an incredible performance from Christopher Judge, who rightfully earned that Best Actor award. The way Kratos is thoughtfully explored in this title was interesting, with his unwillingness to lead his son into war and him grappling with the realization that he's going to have to fight whether he wants to or not. It was a surprisingly funny game too, which I wasn't expecting.
Hey, what happened to all the armor we made you already?
I used it.
Well, maybe try to make this one last longer.
I will not.
The combat, whilst mostly the same as the previous game, felt really great, and there were some fun new attacks to be unlocked, along with its surprisingly in-depth upgrade system that allows you to customize Kratos with different stats that reflect your personal playstyle. The sheer scale of Ragnarok from a technical perspective is also truly impressive, and is likely to be one of the last games that really pushed the PS4 hardware to the limit. The sheer scope of some of the levels is quite wondrous, and the art direction is consistently jaw-dropping. There is never a shortage of incredible vistas to behold as you journey throughout the 9 realms. I also found that the set pieces were a big step up from the first game, and again, the first game wasn't bad in any way. I just found the ones in Ragnarok to be a lot more memorable and engaging personally. If there was an issue with Ragnarok that I had to mention, it would be that I concede with Zero Punctuation's review in that the pacing at times can be a little on the slow side, and sometimes the characters just won't shut up. But overall, they're almost non-issues in what I found to be a game that was very hard to put down.
There he is. There's the God of War.
And with that all said, those were my personal favourite games that I played in 2022. Let me know in the comments what some of your favourite games were, as what you like is subjective, and there was likely a lot of games that came out that I missed. Thank you to everyone who's been watching my channel over the last year for your continued support, and thank you to all who have been subscribing, as it really means the world to me. I have more games I'm planning on covering in 2023, and for those waiting for more Castlevania content, don't worry, as I will be covering the Dead Cells Castlevania crossover DLC. I will also be covering The Last of Us TV show because I'm extremely curious to see whether it turns out to be a real shit show or an actually decent adaptation. Until next time though, stay safe out there everyone, enjoy your new year, and I'll see you all in the next video.